Heidi awoke next morning and looked around her, quite forgetting all that he happened to her the day before. She couldn't think there she was. She rubbed her eyes and looked again, but that made no difference. She was in a big room in a high white bed. There were long white curtains in front of the windows, and two big armchairs, and a sofa covered with some beautiful flowery material. There was a round table, and on a washstand in the corner stood a number of things that she had never seen before. All at once she remembered all that had happened to her overnight, particularly the instructions the tall lady had given her. So far, that is, as she had heard them. She jumped out of bed and dressed quickly. Then she went first to one window, then to the other, and tried to pull back the curtains so that she could help what was outside. They were too heavy to pull, so she kept behind them. The windows were so high that she could only just peep through them, and whatever she looked, there was nothing to be seen but the walls and windows. She began to feel rather frightened at grandfather. She had always gone out of doors first thing in the morning to have a good look round, to see whether the sky was blue and the sun shining, so to say good morning to the trees and flowers. She ran from window to window. At grandfather, she had always gone out of doors first thing in the morning to have a good look round, to see whether the sky was blue and the sun shining, and to say good morning to the trees and flowers. She ran from window to window frantically, her way through the bars of freedom. She felt sure that if he was way through the bars of freedom, could see what was outside, she would find glass somewhere, green grass with the last snow just melting from it. But though she pushed and tugged and tried to put her little fingers under the frames of the window stayed tight shut. After a while she gave up. Perhaps if I went out of doors and round to the back of the house, I'd find some grass, she thought. I know where there were only stones in front. Just then there was a tap at the door, and then I put her head round it, snapped out, "Breakfast ready," and shut it again quickly. Heidi hadn't the last idea what she meant, but she had sounded so fierce that Heidi thought she was being told to stay where she was. She found a little stool under the table and sat down to see what would happen next. It was not long before Miss Rottenmeier came bustling in, very annoyed and scolding all the time. "What's the matter with you, Adelheid? Don't you even know what breakfast is? Come along at once." This is at least Heidi could understand, and she followed her obedience into the dining room. Clara had been waiting there for some time, but gave her a friendly greeting. She looked more cheerful than usual, for she had an idea she was going to have quite an interesting day. Breakfast passed without further incident. Heidi ate her bread and butter quite nicely, and when the meal was over, Clara was wheeled into the study, and Heidi was sent with her and told to wait there until Usher Mr. Usher arrived. As soon as the two girls were alone, Heidi asked, "How can I look out of the window and see what's down below?" "First, the window has to be open," said Clara with a smile. "But they won't open," Heidi answered. "Oh, yes, they will, but you can't do it yourself, and nor can I. But Sebastian will open one for you, if you ask him." Heidi was relieved to hear that. Then Clara began to ask about her life at home, and Heidi was soon chattering away merrily about the mountains and the goats and all the other things she loved so well. While they talked, the tutor arrived, but instead of coming straight to the study as usual, he was wheeled into the dining room to explain the awkward situation in which she found herself some time ago when she Mr. Sarsman was in Paris on business. She began a wrote to tell him that Clara ought to have a companion of her own age. She wanted it, and so did I. For I thought she might work harder at her lessons if she had some competition, and also the companionship would be pleasant and good for her. It would also spare me the necessity to keep her amused all the time, which, believe me, is not easy. Father agreed but insisted that the other child should be treated exactly the same as his own daughter. Her father agreed but insisted. He wrote he would not have any child in this house put upon in any way. A most uncalled for remark, I must say. No one here would be likely to do any such thing. She then told him of her dear arrivals and how utterly unsuitable she found her in every way. Fancy, she doesn't even know her alphabet and has no idea how to behave in polite society. There seems to me only one way out of this dreadful situation, and that is for you to say that it is impossible to teach these two children together without holding back Clara. Quite disastrously. That would surely be reason enough to persuade Mr. Sarasman to send this Swiss girl home again. Mr. Usher was a cautious man, who always tried to look at both sides of any problem. So after severely, politely my consoling remarks, he went on to say that perhaps things might not be as bad as he feared. If the child was backward in some ways, she might be ahead in others, and with regular lessons it might be possible to bring her own quite quickly. Miss Rottenmeier saw that she was not likely to get the support she wanted from his quarter. So obviously the tutor did not all mind teaching Heidi her ABC from the very beginning. She showed him to study down there and watch him go inside, but he thought of having to watch Heidi at her letters and it was more than she could bear. She walked about the dining room restlessly, wondering how the servants had better address Adelheid, for Mr. Sarisman's instruction that the child was to be treated just like his daughter could not only refer to them, she thought. She was not left for long with her thoughts. However, suddenly there was a tremendous clatter in the study as though a lot of things had fallen down, and she heard someone call for Sebastian. She hurried into a room and found the floor strewn with books, writing paper, and inkwell, and the tablecloth from under which a stream of ink was flowing. Heidi was nowhere to be seen. "This is fine to do," said Miss Rottenmeier, wringing her hand. "Book carpets, tablecloth, all covered with ink. Never have I seen such a mess. Of course, it's all that wretched child." Mr. Usher stood looking about him in dismay. Even he could not find anything consoling to say about what had happened, though Clara seemed gently amused by it. "Yes, Hetty did it, quite by accident," she said. "You must not punish her. She just rushed across the room and caught the tablecloth as she went by and swept everything onto the floor with it. There were a lot of carriages going by in the street, and I expect she wanted to look at them. I dare say she has never seen such a thing in her life before. What did I tell you, Mr. Usher? The child is quite impossible. She doesn't even understand that she ought to sit still and listen during a lesson. And where has she go to now? I suppose she's run out of the front door, whatever would Mr. Sermon say." She hurried off downstairs and found Heidi by the open door, looking up and down the street with a puzzled expression. "Some time ago, when Mr. Sermon was in Paris on business, as you began." Clara cried distressedly. That would surely be reason enough to persuade Mr. Sandman to send this Swiss girl home again, because she was enough naughty and she always annoyed them, and she never looked attentively and listened attentively to the lessons Mr. Usher gave. This was the little bit story of made of the story of the Swiss girl that was naughty and anxious and furious in his daily routine. Though she was small and child and it was unobvious,